On Christmas morning, her dog repeatedly blocked the door, and the family's hearts sank as they learned the truth. Max, the cherished golden retriever of the Johnson family, was acting grumpy on what should have been the greatest day of the year. The Johnsons' house was in a quiet suburban area covered with snow, and oddly, nobody could ignore it. Emma Johnson was surrounded by beautifully wrapped gifts and a tree that gleamed softly in the corner, full of Christmas cheer. As she completed making breakfast, she hummed a festive song while her daughter Lily eagerly prodded her. Stalking, but Max had positioned himself securely in front of the front entrance, hissing gently every time among the warmth and joy. The family initially laughed it off when someone tried to approach, thinking he was just being a dumb dog trying to protect himself. Perhaps he believes Santa is still out there. Lily laughed and leaned down to rub Max's fur, but his response shocked her, his gaze darting tensely, his ears pinched back, and he let their gentle buddy occasionally let out a low warning bark. Emma wondered what was bothering him. Max's behavior. She looked at her husband Mark, who had just entered the room with a tray of coffee mugs. Grew increasingly unnerving as he refused to move, his body hard and blocking the door like a resolute guardian's attention was always locked on the door when the family tried to entice him away with toys or goodies. Mark chuckled uneasily, trying to lighten the situation, as though he could sense something beyond it. Perhaps he's simply thrilled. He offered a new chew toy as a Christmas present, but that didn't help either. Instead, he wagging his tail or Max sprung to his feet with excitement and sent out a low, urgent, and melancholy whine. Emma recommended that we check outside, her voice tinged with worry amid the morning's enthusiasm and laughter. Vanished as the family exchanged uncomfortable looks as a great deal of tension entered the room. Mark eventually made his way to the door, but Max barked loudly and nearly sprang to stop him as his hand grabbed for the handle. Max was obviously attempting to tell them something about what they found next, not simply being obstinate, would permanently alter their Christmas morning. Max's unexpected outburst caused the Johnson family to freeze. He growled once more. His paw was clawing loudly and persistently on the wooden floor, as though he was attempting to force Mark away from the entrance. Lee was shocked and quickly gripped her favorite stuffed animal. Why is Max so upset? Emma knelt next to Max and tried to soothe him while whispering in her youthful voice. "It's okay, boy," she replied calmingly as she put a gentle touch on his back and felt the tightness in his muscles. However, Max refused to be comforted, his eyes never leaving the entrance, and his bark was replaced with a low, chilling growl. Mark reluctantly chose to assume leadership, which is likely what sent a chill down Emma's spine. He signaled that perhaps a squirrel or a delivery truck frightened him, but he said nothing more to reassure himself than anyone else. Max's growls became louder with each stride he took toward the door, causing Emma and Lily to back off. Max lunged as Mark took a long breath, turned the knob carefully, and cracked the door open. Outside the snow-covered porch, barking wildly, but Mark was able to restrain him with one hand. Deserted, the area appeared to be, and the chilly early air cut his face. The houses were decked out in peaceful Christmas decorations, and smoke hung languidly from chimneys. But then Mark saw something strange near the porch's edge. A crumpled envelope with sloppy handwriting was partially buried in the snow. Mark took it up, disregarding Max's frantic cries, and his name, Mark Johnson, was scrolled across the front, frowning. As soon as Mark closed the door, he yelled back to Emma and held up the envelope, barking behind him, "There's nothing here but this." Max stopped barking, and the dog's sudden tranquility was replaced by a gentle whine. Emma became even more uneasy and questioned, "What's it say?" as her eyes cautiously moved between Mark and the package. He opened it and took out a single sheet of paper. As he read the note, the contents made his face go pale. "There is no time to explain Emma's situation, so please investigate the woods beyond your house. Cor, you don't know me, but I need your help." "What in the world?" she muttered, her voice falling off as her hand flew to her mouth. Sensing the growing tension, Lily held on to her mother. "Is this some sort of prank?" Mark questioned in a tone that. He looked at Max, who was now sitting by the door, and expressed his doubt. Raised and his eyes were fixed on Mark, almost as though he realized the note's meaning. though I doubt it. Max might respond to a practical joke like this, so Emma suggested that we see what would happen. Mark paused as he gazed out the window at the thick woodland behind their home, thinking that someone had been injured. It seemed ridiculous to venture out into the chilly, icy woods on Christmas morning, but then he turned to face Max. The dog was usually right. They had been saved by their intuition. Before everything was okay, Mark responded, "I'll go take a look," finally reaching for his coat. Emma firmly pulled on her boots and stated, "I'm coming too." Lily stayed inside with Max. I wanted to come, but Emma knelt down and gently placed her hands on Lily's sobbing body, on her daughter's shoulders. "Darling, we need you to be there to keep Max company. He'll feel better if you do." Lily nodded grudgingly as she saw her folks wrap themselves up and leave. Max scratched at the door and whined once more into the cold, seemingly objecting to their choice to depart without him. Mark and Emma walked through the eerily quiet woods behind their house, the snow crunching beneath their feet. The branches of the trees above them moved gently in the wind, creating long shadows on the snowy landscape. "What are we even?" questioned Emma if her breath was visible in the freezing air. "But I'm not." Mark acknowledged that he was clutching the paper firmly in his gloved hand. "But if someone took the time to leave, we can't ignore this." So they ventured farther into the forest and looked for any indications of disruption. Emma paused suddenly and gestured toward what she thought was a small pile of blankets. Mark followed her gaze and noticed it. His pulse was pounding as he approached each step, feeling heavier than the last, until he arrived at the base of a tree. He delicately removed the top layer of fabric from the bundle, revealing a baby inside. The baby was alive, its little chest rising and falling with feeble breaths, but its cheeks were crimson from the cold. "Oh my God," Emma said, her eyes welling up with tears. "There's a baby somewhere." Mark's hands were shaking when he took up the baby and wrapped it snugly in the covers. He said, "Shield it from the cold." His voice was full with emotion, but there wasn't time to ponder. When Emma responded, "We have to return to the house immediately because this baby needs warmth and care," they turned and rushed home, their brains buzzing with concerns about why they had left the infant behind and who had written the note. Lastly, how did Max know something was amiss? When they arrived at their back porch, Max welcomed them with. When he saw the bundle in Mark's arms, he let out frenzied barks and wiggled his tail wildly, ceased barking and gave it a gentle whiff of his worried, delicate lips. Emma hurriedly set up a cozy area for the infant inside the house while Mark dialed 911 and they awaited assistance. As the family arrived, they couldn't get rid of the impression that their Christmas morning had suddenly become a part of a much bigger mystery. Emma hugged the infant tenderly in her arms while they awaited rescue personnel, her heart yearning for. The baby's gentle sounds were slightly disturbed by the little, frail life she was holding. Emma whispered to Mark, who might have heard her, because she was so small and muffled by the warm blanket. After talking with the dispatcher, Mark paced the room while holding his phone. "I don't know, Emma," he said, replied in a worried tone, "but they trusted us to find whoever it was." Max sat next to Emma, his eyes focused on her, and he knew something wasn't right before we even did. The infant appeared to be on watch because his protective posture had not changed, and his ears twitched in response to every sound. Emma gently stroked his head and whispered, "You're a nice boy over the newest member of their family. You rescued her, though." Mark hurried to the door and opened it as soon as 2 sirens sounded, relieving the tension in the room. When the paramedics entered the porch, their expressions changed from one of professional composure to one of obvious surprise at seeing the infant. Mark motioned for them to come inside, and we discovered Emma in her arms. "This is the baby we called about." The paramedics rapidly evaluated the baby's condition in the woods behind our house, their faces softening as one of them stated, smiling slightly, "It's confirmed that she's stable and a fighter. It's incredible that she's doing so well after being left outside while the paramedics got ready to take the infant to the." Mark and Emma were referred to the hospital for additional assessment. "Do you have?" Mark shook his head. "Any idea who might have left her there?" "No, see," he continued, "but we found this note on our porch," giving it to the paramedic, who attentively studied it while furrowing his brow. He said, "We'll make sure the authorities know about this. Hopefully it will help." As the ambulance withdrew, Emma stood on the porch, holding Mark's arm, trying to figure out what was happening. "I hope she'll be all right," she said, her eyes sparkling. "She will be marked," he said. "Whoever wrote that note knew we'd discover her in time, but she's strong and firm." The mystery continued when Mark was drinking coffee the following morning and heard Max growl softly. The dog was. Mark initially joined him in looking out the living room window with his nose pushed against the glass. Saw only the new layer of snow that had fallen overnight, and nothing out of the ordinary, but then he noticed movement. At the edge of the woods, partially hidden by the trees, a figure was seen. The individual was wrapped in a. They appeared to be observing the home while wearing a large coat and hat, their features disguised. Mark's heart accelerated, and he contacted Emma. Emma rushed to his side, her eyes widening, while he spoke quietly. "Do you think it's Mark?" she asked when she spotted the figure. "But I'm going to find out, Mark. Wait," Emma said. Mark paused, staring back at her Max, and grasped his arm, wondering if it was safe. "Will accompany me, Hune, and alert me if something goes wrong." Emma nodded grudgingly, her concern clear. "Mark, be careful." Max followed closely behind him as he put on his coat and boots and went outside, where the chilly air burned his face. He moved carefully toward the person, his heart racing with each stride, and when he was around 20 feet away, the figure turned and started to enter the woods to wait for Mark to shout out, "I just want to talk." Someone hesitated for a second, but instead of turning around, they held up a hand as Max gave a single bark, but Mark restrained him, indicating that he should remain in his current location before vanishing into the forest. "Let them go, boy," he murmured quietly, "because they're not yet ready to talk. Mark, whoever they are, they're watching," he added, recounting what had occurred to Emma. "But I don't think they mean any." Emma nodded, "But if they had, they wouldn't have left the infant on our porch." She was still worried. "Do you believe they'll return?" Mark acknowledged that we must be prepared if they do. The family stayed tense over the following 3 days, observing the woods for any indications of the enigmatic stranger. Ma was more vigilant than before, his nose always pricked up and his ears, seemingly sensing something that people couldn't. And then one night, Max was already at the door when there was another knock. Mark and Emma looked at each other, their pulses pounding. This time, he was cautiously waving his tail, and when Mark opened the door, there was just another package inside. It was a picture of the infant wrapped in the same blankets they had discovered her in, with a single line of gratitude scrawled on the back. Emma gasped, her palm flying, and Mark's blood went cold as he read the lines out loud. "Thank you for saving her. She's in danger," she questioned, her voice shaking. "What does that mean?" "I'm not sure. According to Mark, he's thinking, but whoever left knows something, and if she's still in danger, we must determine why." Max gave a gentle bark that seemed to indicate that he was ready. Mark put a hand on the dog's head, his determination to learn the truth growing. His words, "no matter what it takes," caused Emma's mind to rush as she tried to comprehend Bella's abrupt change. The dog, who had previously been a devoted and peaceful companion, suddenly appeared to be acting more urgently. Bella was so desperate that she growled, scratched at the door, and even whimpered in grief, as though begging with. Emma mumbled, her voice shaking, "I can't ignore this any longer." Bella quickly ran outside into the snow-covered yard, barking as she opened the door after grabbing her coat. Emma, struggling to keep up with Bella, Emma, followed her boots crunching on the frozen ground with increased zeal. The dog's behavior was typical of Emma, as she made a trail in the freshly fallen snow with her paw across the backyard. Had ever saw her moving deliberately, stopping occasionally to look back at her owner, as if to remind her to hurry. Emma muttered, gripping her coat more tightly against the chilly wind. "Where are you taking me, girl?" After what seemed like an eternity, Bella paused close to the ancient oak tree that delineated the boundary of their land and started to pour at the. Emma's pulse raced as she knelt next to Bella, who had unearthed her, and her barks were replaced by low, melancholy whines. Emma's hands were shaking as she picked up a small, worn wooden box that was concealed beneath a thin layer of snow. When she opened it, she saw fading messages and photos with yellowed edges from aging. Her breath hitched when she saw her parents' warm smiles, maybe seen in the faces looking back at her in the pictures. It was her, clutching a small infant in a blue blanket. "What is this?" Emma read through the letters, her fingers shaking as she said, her voice barely audible over the raging wind. When she unfolded one, she discovered a secret Emma had never known about her mother. Written in her handwriting, parents have been actively interested in providing resources to underprivileged families in the neighborhood. Offer food, shelter, and medical support. They had done so in silence. Emma was never looking for attention, but if you're reading this, one line in the letter made her shiver. Indicates that something we didn't expect has surfaced. If you want to learn more, check out the journal in the attic. Emma held the letter close to her bosom, tears running down her cheeks, knowing that her parents had always been there for her. Heroes, but she was unaware of how much they had given up. Bella pushed Emma's. "I understand now," Emma whispered softly, holding her hand gently as though to console her. Voice breaking, "You're attempting to mentor me." Emma, who was committed to finding the truth, hurried back to the house with Bella at her heels, climbing the creaky attic steps with her faithful companion at her side, her pulse pounding as. After looking through dusty boxes and neglected mementos, she eventually discovered an old. As Emma turned the pages of her leather-bound journal, which had her father's initials inscribed on the cover, she discovered a. The journal was loaded with names, dates, and anecdotes about her parents' efforts to assist families in need. Lives they had impacted, but as the writings came to a close, her father's had written about threats they had received from influential people who believed their generosity posed a danger to. One line that really caught their attention was, "We've done what we can, but they have advised us to stop since the threat is real. But we cannot abandon those in need if something were to happen to us. Bella will be aware that she will keep Emma safe and guide her to the truth." Emma's breath caught. When she saw how serious her parents' remarks were, Bella took responsibility for everything she had done, including barking, blocking the door, and her parents had planned to bring her to the box in order to make sure their legacy of bravery and kindness would not be. She looked at Bella, who looked back at her, and forgot she knew Emma's whisper. "You've always been watching over me with understanding and composure." But the journal. Names of people her parents had been assisting before they passed away, which also alluded to unresolved business. Emma realized she couldn't deny the fact that her parents had put everything on the line to do what was right, even if it meant that someone might still be in danger. And now when it was her turn, Bella softly barked as though to reassure Emma. Bella nodded and reaffirmed her resolve, saying, "We're not done yet, but we'll finish." Emma began by sitting down at her kitchen table and going over the journal entries late into the night. The world was covered in a cold, silent stillness as the snow continued to fall outside, but a fire was burning within. Emma had a strong desire to uphold her parents' legacy and discover the whole truth about what had happened to. As Bella lay at her feet, Emma couldn't help but believe that the secrets she was keeping were just getting started. The things her parents had concealed were more complicated than she had ever thought, and the road ahead would be difficult. However, Emma felt prepared to face whatever lied ahead with Bella at her side, so she wasn't alone. The truth, no matter how devastating it may be. Emma sat at the snow-covered landscape as dawn broke. The findings from the previous evening spun in her mind as she opened her parents' journal on the kitchen table. Bella laid at her feet with her eyes alert as the entrance drew her more into their world of silent bravery and altruistic deeds. As if feeling the weight of what Emma had discovered, Margaret's name kept coming up in the journal. According to Delaney's essay, Emma's parents considered Margaret to be a close friend and confidant who had shared their aim of assisting others. But Margaret found the final note about her disturbing. Is at jeopardy because of the record she possesses. If something were to happen to us, she would be aware of it. Emma's pulse raced, so she had to find out if Margaret was still alive or at least she thought so. The journal referenced a bakery Margaret operated in a nearby town, but it didn't give an address. With shaky hands, Emma reached for her phone and quickly discovered the name of the bakery. Emma said that Margaret's hearth was still there, sparking a glimmer of hope. She looked down at Bella, who was waving her tail, knowing the severity of the situation. "We're going on a ride, girl." The trip to the town was stressful because the roads were. With the countryside covered in long shadows from the early morning sun and slick with fresh snow, Emma's mind was racing as she reiterated her parents' cautions against Margaret keeping hazardous documents for so long. Was she safe? And more significantly, what had caused Bella's behavior to abruptly change? Could Margaret's safety or possibly her own, have been in jeopardy when she arrived to the bakery. The charming appearance of the tiny red brick structure with frosted windows and, despite the cozy facade, Emma couldn't get rid of the anxiety when she saw a sign that read Margaret's Hearth Fresh Baked Pastries Daily. It became comfortable in her chest as she walked into the bell above the door, which was jingling quietly. Her nerves were momentarily calmed behind the counter by the welcoming scent of freshly made bread and pastries. An old woman with silver hair neatly arranged in a bun and gentle eyes stood. "Good morning," she said, looking up. "What can I get you today?" Warmly asked. Emma paused, unsure of where to start. "Are you Margaret Delaney?" When she eventually asked, her voice trembled a little, and her grin wavered. "Yes, I am. And you are?" "I am Emma," she said, closely examining Emma. Growing up, Emma Carter was the daughter of Sarah and Michael Carter. When their names were mentioned, Margaret's eyes grew wide, and she hurried out from behind the bar to join Sarah and Michael. "Daughter, please accompany me." Margaret led Emma to a small back room where people couldn't see her. Once inside Margaret, Bella followed intently, her body stiff and her ears perked up. Shut the door and motioned for Emma to take a seat. Margaret added, "I never thought I'd see you," in a sorrowful tone. "What brought you here after all this time? Your parents were amazing people." Emma took the journal out of her bag and put it on the table and discovered this, which directed me to you and stated that you had documents. Something they trusted you with. Margaret's expression darkened, and she looked around the room as if to be sure they were able to be overheard, and I had protected them for years in anticipation of the day when someone would come for them. "But Emma, you have to realize that these records are risky since they reveal influential individuals who would." Emma's pulse thumped, wondering why they would do anything to conceal their secrets. Bella was sitting attentively at Emma's feet, acting as though she knew something I didn't. Margaret observed Bella. Perhaps she understands the need, because animals have instincts that we cannot fully understand. In any case, the timing isn't coincidental. Perhaps your parents prepared her for this time. Margaret stood and took a small, sealed box out of a secret wall compartment, set it on the table, and gave Emma a. "Your parents trusted me with all of this information, including bank records, letters, and proof of their corruption." Emma hesitated, her fingers grazing the surface. "But once you open it, there's no turning back. Are you prepared for this?" The burden of her parents' legacy weighed heavily on her, yet she felt a growing resolve that she had to understand the reality for them. Since she opened the box and cautiously took out stacks of papers, pictures, and a USB drive were among its contents. As Emma quickly perused the records, it became evident how big her parents' mission was. They had discovered a network of corruption that was considerably more widespread than she had anticipated among municipal authorities, powerful businesspeople, and even the law. Margaret touched Emma's shoulder, indicating that the police were involved and that they wanted you to complete the task they had begun. "But take caution, Emma. These individuals won't stop to keep their secrets safe." Emma nodded, her determination resolute. Bella collected the documents Emma knew, and "She and I will see this through, so let their sacrifices be in vain." The journey ahead would be dangerous, but she was prepared to face it with Bella by her side and her parents' bravery in tow. Confront whatever lay ahead. The truth was there, and Emma was resolved to find it at all costs and despite the wait. As Emma left Margaret's baker, she couldn't stop thinking about the documents. The disclosures were astounding, and Bella was always by her side, walking purposefully and in time with her movements, even if the stakes were higher than she could have imagined. Emma became more determined as she got in her car and understood that the first obstacle would be figuring out. Several local leaders were implicated in the documents, making it tough to determine who to trust. Margaret had been transparent with the authorities without running the risk of being exposed. Emma's parents battled and did everything in their power to hide the truth from her. Arranged the box's contents on our dining table, including pictures of shady encounters and documents of dubious transactions, and a flash disk with Emma's name on it created a clear image of her parents' mission. The flash drive called out to her, but she was hesitant to open it. Bella pushed her leg as though to encourage her to keep taking a chance, unleashing more danger than she had anticipated. After taking a big breath, Emma put the flash drive in her laptop, and the screen appeared with just one folder containing Carter files, where scanned documents, emails, films, and dozens of other items, one of which was a video. When she clicked on the file named To Emma, her parents' faces and expressions showed. Emma's father started out by saying, "Stay calm if you're." Seeing this indicates that we were unable to complete the task at hand, but we still have faith in you because you have always shown strength, resourceful, and courageous. We apologize for putting you through this. But her mother persisted in saying that the truth must be known. Voice softer, but resolute. These documents are evidence that we have discovered something that has the potential to completely alter everything. They are pursuing us because of a network of corruption that extends from our small hamlet to influential figures in the state. Yet, you're not alone. Margaret can help you, and Bella was taught to keep you safe. As the video concluded, Emma's eyes began to well up with tears, reminding her to trust her gut and not allow fear stop her. She felt a mixture of grief and resolve from her unwavering faith in her, and she reached out to Bella, who laid her down, head on Emma's lap, her amber eyes brimming with confidence. "I promise not to disappoint you, Emma," said. The next step was obvious. She had to interpret the documents and determine her course of action. She spending hours going through the files to make the connections between names, dates, and events. One name kept coming up: Mayor Grant Wheeler. He was well liked in the neighborhood, but the records presented a distinct image of bribery, embezzlement, and connections to illegal enterprises. Emma considered Margaret's parting words, "You'll find the answers in unexpected places," as she recognized she needed allies. The proprietor of the bakery had mentioned a retired friend of her parents who had previously assisted them. After a brief internet search, she found a journalist named Peter Langston who was the best person to guide her through this maze. Emma hesitated for a moment after seeing Peter's contact details. He lived in a remote cabin just outside of town. Minute then called him and said, "Hello," a rough voice said. "Mr. Langston, my name is Emma Carter, and my parents were Michael and Sarah Carter." There was a Carter pause. Emma, the daughter of Sarah and Michael, said, "Yes, I located their documents and please come to my cabin. I've been waiting for your assistance." Another pause, then a sigh. Bella sat in the passenger seat, her ears perked up, her eyes focused on Peter during the stressful trip to his cabin. The rustic aspect of the cottage, which was tucked away in a thick woodland, belied the seriousness of the talk. Emma was ready to have Peter greet her at the door. His weathered face and gray hair were evidence of years of pursuit. He led her inside, where bookshelves and framed press clippings alluded to his legendary. Peter motioned for her to sit down, saying, "Your parents were brave in their careers, sacrificed everything for the truth. What have you discovered?" Emma presented the documents that detailed all of her possessions. Revealed. Peter listened carefully, his forehead furrowed as he took in the news. "This is explosive," he finally said. Stated, "But it's risky as well because Wheeler and his supporters will not think twice about pursuing you if they learn about this." "I can't leave this," Emma stated in a calm voice, and Peter nodded. "Well, we'll expose them because I won't let you handle this alone, but we must be wise about it and begin by creating copies of." As they planned, the truth must endure if anything were to happen to us. Emma followed Bella's attention to the window as she snarled abruptly, her body stiff. Peter whispered in a quiet voice, "We need to move," as the shadow of a man vanished into the woods and someone was observing us. Emma and Peter worked late into the night to prepare for the struggle ahead, as the sense of urgency grew rapidly. The battle her parents started gave Emma a renewed feeling of purpose as she left the cabin with Bella at her side. Was now hers to complete, and she was prepared to face the chilly air that lay ahead. Bella trotted nearby, her ears attentive to the interaction at Peter's, and stung Emma's cheeks as she rushed back to her car. Cabin had made the issue more serious because someone was observing them, and as she drove away, the thick woodland appeared to shut up on her, sending long, menacing shadows over. Emma whispered to Bella, "Be careful on the winding road," her eyes darting. She couldn't get rid of the impression that they were being followed, the paperwork hidden between the road and the rearview mirror. With every mile that went by, the weight of the truth pushing down on her back in town made her bag feel more secure. Since it was no longer secure, Emma chose not to go home and instead went to paying with cash at a modest motel on the outskirts to avoid leaving a trace in the room. Was simple but tidy, providing a makeshift haven where she could gather and strategize her next move inside Emma's spread. Systematically arranging the duplicated documents on the bed according to their names, dates, and links, patterns started to uncover a network of corruption that connected Mayor Wheeler to illegal operations outside of their town. Records of illicit land transactions, official bribery, and affiliations with Evergreen Development. Emma muttered as she typed the name in her laptop, and a number of articles praised the company's investments on employment and infrastructure, but more investigation revealed environmental. Evergreen noticed a news report about infractions and claims of coercion. A photo was included in the story announcing a new project in Pinecrest County, which was only a few towns away. The CEO of Evergreen Development, Richard Hale, is seen shaking hands with Mayor Wheeler, so that's the connection Emma made while taking notes, and Bella closely observed her, tilting her head as though she understood everything she said. Emma's heart was racing when she heard a knock on the door, so she approached carefully. She shouted out housekeeping, and a woman's voice answered, "Who is it?" Emma hadn't asked for any services, but she said firmly, "No, thank you." There was silence, but someone was still there, as seen by the shadows beneath the door, and Bella gave her a low growl. Emma's instincts told her that something was amiss, and she silently collected the papers and placed them back in her bag. Glancing around, she noticed a bathroom window that one of the back alley. "Come on, Bella," she said in a whisper, and they entered the restroom. Emma cautiously pushed open the window, letting the chilly air flood in as she pulled herself out before reaching back for Bella. The motel room door exploded open as they entered the alley, and the dog deftly jumped through before the words flowed out. She went outside to check, but she was unable to get very far since Emma's heart was racing. Keeping to the shadows, Bella went swiftly but stealthily along the alley before emerging onto a side street, where Emma ducked into a tiny cafe that was just getting started for the day. When Emma and Bella walked in, the barista looked up in surprise. She said, "We're not quite open yet, but you're welcome to come in and warm up." Emma thanked her. With a trembling voice, she sat down by the window and took out her phone to call Peter. "Emma, where are you?" Peter asked. His voice was worried. "I'm at a Maple Street cafe. They discovered me at the motel, and I believe they're following me." Peter stated that you must immediately turn off your phone's GPS and take out the battery if. Emma abruptly shut down her phone, raising the possibility that they were using it to find you. "What should I do now?" "Let's meet at. The old train station is deserted in 30 minutes, so it should be safe for us to speak." She accepted and hung up. The barista came over with a complimentary cup of steaming tea, her hands shaking. Emma responded, "Looks like you could use it. Thank you," with a slight smile. After warming up, Emma and Bella went toward the train station. A remnant of a bygone era was tucked away amid alleys and streets to avoid notice. Ivy Peter was already there, and the once grand architecture is now faded and overgrown. "They've escalated," he continued, "and we don't have much time to wait near the entrance. Their efforts. We must find a person who can act on this knowledge without being jeopardized." "Who can we trust?" Emma inquired whether I had an investigative contact at a national publication. "A trustworthy journalist with the means to defend you and reveal this corruption is Lisa Chun." Bella snarled once more at that moment. Her gaze focused on two black SUVs that had drew up guys in dark suits. "Went outside and looked around, finding us," Emma murmured, and Peter gave a stern nod. "Follow me," as they entered the station and made their way through dilapidated platforms and deteriorating hallways. Although the labyrinthine arrangement offered protection, the footsteps behind them became closer. When they arrived at a maintenance tunnel, Peter led them through a small opening that was. It was dark and wet, but it provided a possible escape, so he urged everyone to keep going. It was unclear if the cops were allies or not as they appeared a few blocks away, the sound of sirens suddenly filling the air. As they hurried off, they found Peter's automobile hidden in an alley, part of the corruption, and trusted no one. Emma was relieved to see the guys swarming the location they had just left, but she was also struck by how, determined to get in touch with Lisa Peter, they dialed a number. After a quick chat on a secure phone, he turned to Emma, who agreed to meet us in a secure location. Emma nodded as she handed over the documents, and Sheck began the process of exposing them. She's becoming tired, and I just want this to be over, Peter promised. Bella put her head on Emma's lap and comforted her, saying, "Your parents would be proud of you, Kai." Emma saw a ray of hope despite the danger, since they were now closer than ever to revealing the truth, and with supporters like. As Emma decided to see this voyage through, Peter and Lisa had a fighting chance as they headed toward an unknown future. Through for herself, her parents, and anyone harmed by corruption. As Peter's car rushed toward justice, she was no longer fleeing scared as the shadows closed in. Emma's thoughts were racing through the dark streets toward the safe place Lisa had mentioned was located outside of town. Investigative journalists once visited this remote cottage for high-stakes stories. It was their final. Bella sat up straight, her ears perked up as though realizing that she needed to regroup and plan. Every set of headlights in the rearview mirror felt like a potential due to the tense and serious nature of the drive. When they eventually arrived, Threat Peter kept the discussion to a minimum so he could concentrate on negotiating the winding roads. The cottage was dark and tucked away among thick trees that appeared to protect it from inquisitive eyes. Lisa was. She was a small woman with keen eyes who was already waiting on the porch with a flashlight. She waved them inside, saying, "Miss nothing. We have a lot to go over, and not much time." The interior of the cabin was simple yet practical, with a big table in the middle acting as their makeshift war room. Emma didn't spend any time spreading the paperwork out while describing all she and Peter had found, and Lisa occasionally paid close attention, taking notes, saying, "This is damning," and finally displaying a copy of a ledger showing payments made to local politicians. "If we can verify these records, it might blow the entire." Emma leaned back in her chair, operation wide open, "But we'll need to move fast before they realize we're going public." Her face was etched with chair fatigue. "How can we even begin? They're everywhere." Followed me to the motel, and I'm confident they'll ultimately locate us here. Lisa grimly agreed. "They will, but we haven't. Benefit that they aren't yet aware of me. I'll work with my staff to spread the word, but in the interim, you two must remain." Peter added, "Do we have secure channels for communication?" "Under the radar." Lisa took out a satellite phone and gave it to Peter. "It is encrypted and should only be used in. I've set up a secure area for Emma's crises. But we must move swiftly before they can complete their." With a deep growl, Bella's muscles tensed as she faced Emma's hard door. She muttered, "Sank, they're here," and Lisa turned down the lights, lowering the. Peter signaled Emma and Bella to remain low as he looked out the window into the darkness. 2 SUVs had. Men in dark suits were parked at the perimeter of the property, their spotlights blazing through the darkness. "We need to move, kid," Peter snarled. So Lisa snatched up a laptop and shoved the documents inside a waterproof bag. "I'll stay and purchase them. A rear exit leads to a TR. Follow it to the river." "You'll be caught," Emma argued, but Lisa's look was resolute. When things became worse, Peter didn't hesitate since this story is bigger than any of us. The sound of boots crunching on gravel increased in volume as the men led Emma and Bella to the back door. The only sound Bella made was a low growl, and she stayed close. The trail was uneven and small, but they were driven by adrenaline. As twigs gripped Emma's clothes, the chilly night air cut her face. Peter looked back as spotlights danced through the trees and voices yelled behind them. "I'm going to keep going. Catching up to us." The path led to a clearing where the riverbank. Peter had a small boat. Set up the escape route as a backup plan, and he encouraged Emma and Bella to board the boat while The boat floated into the river as the strong current unfastened the rope. Emma let out a big breath as the cries of their assailants faded into the distance. Salisa whispered in concern, the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. Peter reassured her through his face that she knew what she was doing based on her voice. Denied his own suspicions that she would tell the tale. The river carried them for miles, its murky waters reflecting the only sounds in the moonlight were Bella's soft breathing and the soft lap of the water. As Emma gripped the documents, which represented their last hope, were securely sealed in a waterproof bag before they arrived at a little port. Peter assisted Emma in getting from the boat into the waiting automobile, which will transport us to a secure location. House further away, We can keep an eye on things for hours after they reached a secluded farmhouse encircled by open fields. It was almost silent. Emma crumbled, but it provided the much-needed safety they needed inside. Bella nestled up next to her on a shabby couch as Peter secured the perimeter, her presence providing solace in the midst of the commotion. Thankful for her steadfast devotion, Emma ran her fingers through the dog's fur. Peter returned, his face smeared with weariness. Is gone for the time being, he said, but dawn broke. When Emma's phone buzzed, she saw a message from Lisa that had been delivered over a secure channel. Emma's heart was pounding when she accessed a news website on Peter's laptop, and the headline read, "The story is live, brace yourselves. Corruption in a tiny town exposed the mayor and officials who are being investigated." Every connection, payoff, and treachery found in the documents was described in the piece, Emma muttered. Peter put a comforting hand on her shoulder while she was crying, saying, "This is just the beginning. They'll fight back." But now everyone is aware that Bella quietly barked as though she agreed with the Emma experienced hope for the first time in days. They had changed the course, but together, they would see that the fight for justice was far from done in the softly illuminated farmhouse kitchen. Emma sat at the war wooden table, holding a mug of coffee as the early sun peeked through the lace curtains. The news was spreading like wildfire, and Lisa's article had gone viral. Going viral and receiving widespread notice, social media was ablaze with indignation as people in their area and beyond revealed that Peter had gone into the kitchen with his laptop under one. He put the laptop down and said, "It's a circus out there," holding a walkie-talkie in his arm. "The mayor's office is. The facility is barricaded, and media are pouring in. Law enforcement has been divided, with some police who support Wheeler." Emma's gut nodded while others demanded an investigation. "Do you believe they'll target us again?" Peter nodded. "They will do so solemnly, but now that the news is public, they must." Bella, our best shield, is laying at Emma's feet, perked up under close public inspection. Emma's gaze froze when she heard a distant car, and her ears perked up, letting out a low warning growl. "Do you believe Peter silenced her by holding up a hand when they met? He seized the Are we expecting anyone?" a crackly voice said as she talked into a walkie-talkie. "No, everything is fine on my end." Peter signaled Emma to remain motionless before taking a revolver out of a drawer and tucking it into his belt. Bella trailed him to the entrance, peeping through the curtains with her hackles up. Peter noticed a black car with tinted windows that obscured the resident's stay was idling at the edge of the property. As Peter neared the car, his senses were all on high alert, and he murmured to Emma as he stepped outside into the icy air. A middle-aged man wearing a fine suit appeared when the driver's window went down, and he lifted his hands in a gesture of, "Give up. I'm not here to stir up trouble," the man remarked in a calm, yet forceful voice. Peter's eyes narrowed. "Federal, huh? Let's see some identification, man. My name is Robert Langston, and I work as a federal investigator." Obeyed, giving his credentials and badge to Peter, who examined them closely and said, "Why are you here, Langston?" Looked at the farmhouse, Peter. "I need to talk to Emma Hart, because what she found has ramifications that go well beyond your town." Nodded toward the house after hesitating, "But don't try anything inside." As they walked in, Emma stood there looking suspicious. Langston sat down at the table and said, "Hello, Miss Hart. After reading Lisa Chink's paper and looking over the supporting documentation, I need you to comprehend the scope of." Emma's hold on her coffee cup tightened as you revealed it. "And what do you mean by?" Langston leaning forward his. "To be serious, your town's corruption is a part of a larger network called Evergreen. This is only the beginning of their money laundering, official coercing, and silencing tactics. Why come to us?" When Peter folded his arms in front of whistleblowers from several states. "Why don't you take care of this yourself, Langston? Emma needs to testify. Without her, the investigation would stagnate. A first-hand account and the original documents are essential to constructing a case." Emma's heart fell as she spoke in court. Langston acknowledged that it's dangerous, but "Yook, be covered by federal protection. We'll move you and offer 24-hour security," Peter said. "And what?" Langston's jaw tensed, indicating that if they discover her before then, they've already shown that they won't stop at nothing. "Why do we have to hurry? I prepared a safe house, and we'll take Emma and Bella there right away." Emma looked down. What about Peter, whom he has been with? Bella stared back with steadfast loyalty. Langston hesitated throughout all of this, but he could come for a short while. The more individuals involved, Peter acknowledged the increased risk and said, I'll make sure she gets there safely, Langston. I got out a secure satellite phone and said, I need to make some calls. Gather your belongings. We're leaving in 15 minutes. Emma turned to Peter as Langston went outside to make his call. Do you believe this was the right decision? Peter put the only option if Langston is speaking the truth is to place a comforting touch on her shoulder. Emma nodded, snatching herself. But in reality, this may ruin the entire operation and you'd be assisting countless others. Bella trotted following her, knowing the seriousness in the situation, as Peter guarded the farmhouse and she packed a tiny suitcase with necessities. The journey was tense as Langston led them to his car when they were ready. Bella sat alert in the back car, her eyes searching the horizon at every bend, feeling as though she may be ambushed. After several hours of travel, they arrived at the safe house, a plain cabin in a secluded location encircled by dense woods in Langston. Gave Peter a dossier that included everything he would need for the next few days. I will return after everything is set up. Ready for the testimony. Emma sat on the door as Peter secured the doors and inspected the interior as Langston drove away. Do you think we'll ever be safe again? She questioned, holding Bella's leash tightly on the couch. Peter sat next to her, his face solemn. I'm not sure, but I know you're not alone in this. We'll deal with whatever comes up. Bella put her head on Emma's lap as they came together, serving as a reminder of. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, but within the cabin, the tie that had kept them together through the pandemonium. Emma's tenuous sense of hope started to grow, and she decided to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. Now that the truth was out, it was now her responsibility to make sure justice was served. That night, the safe house was still, the kind of silence that appeared to. Emma sat by the fireplace, gazing into the leaping flames, louder than any noise, while Bella rested at her feet, her steady. Peter was in the next room, going over the documents Langston had left the weight in, and the only sound in the room was his breathing. Of the day weighed heavily on Emma's shoulders as she considered the ramifications of her choice. Her thoughts strayed to her early memories of Christmas mornings, the coziness of her family, the delight of opening presents, and the laughing that reverberated throughout the entire home seemed like a faraway memory. And suddenly she had discovered a deadly truth, and the reality she faced was drastically different. Emma Peter contacted to say that it endangered not just her safety, but also her future. He entered the room with a file in his hand and a grim attitude. What do you mean? Peter sat across from Emma. Emma looked up, heart falling, before we understood there was more to this. Langston's paperwork, which contained information about other whistleblowers, are placed on the table between them. The majority of those who attempted to disclose Evergreen Development and their network either vanished or met tragic ends. He expects me to testify against them, knowing that Emma felt cold. Peter nodded. He does, but if you don't testify, it's about everyone they've harmed. Not just you, Emma. Emma groaned and ran a hand through her hair. But how can I trust them to stop destroying more lives? How can I be sure he won't take advantage of me and abandon me to handle the fallout? Langston? Peter leaned over and spoke firmly. You only need to trust yourself, Emma. You've gone this far, and you're stronger than you previously believed. Bella's ears perked up. Emma was able to reply, and she stood with her tail stiff and let out. With a low growl, Peter reached for his sidearm right away. He looked around the room and asked, "What is it, girl?" "Bella." Peter motioned for Emma to remain back as he approached the window as she walked toward the front entrance, her nose twitching, gazing into the shadows of the woodland beyond, with the moonlight hardly illuminating the thick. Peter said, "Trees. I don't see anything." But Emma's heartbeat accelerated as Bella's roar grew louder. "You believe there's someone out there?" Peter didn't respond right away. Instead, he went to the door and unlocked it. Bella quietly followed Emma outside, keeping a close eye on her strained posture, seeing her hands clutching the frame from the doorway. The temperature was chilly, and the only noise was the rustle of the trees in the wind. Bella sniffed the ground while Peter examined the perimeter with his flashlight piercing the darkness. She was moving deliberately when she abruptly stopped, her head darting toward the forest line. When she let out a low bark, Peter pointed his torch in the same direction, but for a brief second, there was only the sway of the branches. A figure appeared, and Peter requested that he raise his weapon. As they came out of the shadows, the figure lifted their hands and approached. Emma knew it was Langston. Peter questioned, his voice tinged with suspicion. "What are you doing here?" Langston approached warily, his breath evident. "I had to return in the chilly air because of a development. They know where you are," and Emma's heart fell. "How?" "I don't know, but they've been organizing, and according to my sources, they'll make a move tonight." "We must." Peter scowled and said, "Leave now." "How do they find us?" "This place was meant to be secure." Langston's face darkened. "Someone tipped, causing a leak in my team." Emma looked at Bella, who was standing protectively at her side, and said, "What do we do?" "I barely arrived before them. I have another safe home ready," she said in a shaky voice as Langston pointed to the car parked down the hill. "We must go even though it's more remote and far away." Peter paused, his gaze. Langston caught his gaze and asked, "How can we know we can trust you when we know you could be putting us in danger?" Tense stillness. "You don't. But if we remain here, you'll discover the hard way that I'm being honest." Peter took a quick look at Emma when she spoke in a steady voice. Reluctantly, I nodded, "But I'm driving." So they hastily packed their belongings and left. Once Bella's eyes were fixated on the far-off forest, no trace behind her barked, as if. Emma put a hand on her head, sensing the danger there, and whispered, "It's okay, girl. We'll be safe as they." Emma couldn't get rid of the sensation that this was just the start of a lengthy and dangerous journey as she was placed in a Langston's automobile. As they drove away, leaving the safe home behind, Emma's rearview mirror saw the headlights piercing the darkness. She believed she spotted shadows scuttling between the trees, but as the vehicle veered a turn and the woodland disappeared from view, so she dismissed the idea for the time being. As the vehicle raced through the twisting forest roads, all they could do was keep going. Emma sat in the rear seat with Langston was in the passenger seat, directing Peter as Bella rested her head on her lap. Drove steadily with focus, and the dashboard's light revealed their tight faces and the car's quiet was only interrupted by the engine's hum, and Emma's thoughts began to quickly piece together the pieces of the circumstances. She had decided to put her trust in Langston once more, but she still harbored doubts when she looked at him. With the street lights shining on his face, she said, "Where exactly are we going?" in a firm yet slightly. About an hour later, Langston moved slightly in her direction, feeling uneasy. "From here, FS off the grid is encircled by thick woods, making it difficult for them to follow us." Peter scowled and tightened his hold. Langston's jaw tensed as he gripped the steering wheel. "How do you know they haven't followed you yet?" "Made sure I wasn't followed. Believe me, I wouldn't endanger any of you." Peter gave a brief, unfunny laugh. "You haven't exactly earned trust," Langston. Emma said, breaking the tension with her voice. "We need to concentrate on getting ahead of whoever is pursuing us right now, so we don't have time for this." Langston nodded in. "She's correct. Once we arrive at the lodge, we can reassemble and determine our." The automobile went silent once again after that, and Emma's mind wandered to Christmas mornings long since this one was over. What she had envisioned was fear, anxiety, and the impending holiday in place of the coziness of family and joy. Emma was startled out of her reverie by Bella's gentle whine, shadow of danger, and she caressed the dog's fur, whispered softly, "Don't worry, girl. We'll get through this." Suddenly a man in the center of the road was lighted by headlights. Peter applied the brakes, and the vehicle screeched to a stop. Everyone was startled forward, and Bella gave a piercing yelp, her body stiff. Peter murmured, "The hell," as he squinted through the window at the figure hidden in the forest darkness. Didn't move. Langston unbuckled his seatbelt and reached for his concealed handgun out of reflex. He forcibly opened the car door and commanded, "Stay here." Peter quickly followed. Emma leaned forward, her pulse thumping, not going out there by herself. "Be careful." With the sound of the automobile engine idling behind them, Langston and Peter ventured out into the chilly night, but the figure remained still. Langston yelled at them as they stood still in the center of the road. Langston and Peter did not respond. "Who are you, and what do you want?" Looked at one another before hesitantly approaching. And as they got near, they understood. Langston swore beneath his breath, since the figure wasn't a human, but rather a mannequin, shabbily clad in a hat and a ragged coat. Breath of diversion, Peter whirled around, looking in both directions at the dark forest. Before they could respond further, the sound of tires screeching pierced the air, causing a black hole to appear on the side of the road. With its headlights out until the very last second, the SUV came out of the shadows, stopped behind their vehicle, preventing them from getting inside. Peter then yelled an important message to Langston, and Peter ran, returning to the vehicle as dark-clad guys poured out of the SUV. Bella yelled angrily, and Emma unlocked the rear door. Peter stepped into the driver's seat, and Langston slid into the passenger seat as he called for the dog to get inside. "Drive," Langston shouted as he slammed the door shut, and Peter didn't think twice. Slammed the pedal and pushed the car into reverse, causing the tires to squeal as they drove backward, almost missed the SUV. They sped down the road after spinning the wheel, which forced the vehicle into a sudden curve. Emma crouched reflexively as gunfire roared out, breaking the rear window. Bella yelled, "Keep your head down." Peter drove the car to its breaking point, causing the speedometer to rise as the men in the SUV chased after them as they sped into the woodland, their headlights piercing the darkness behind them. Rolling down the window, Langston drew his rifle and fired multiple shots at the pursuing car, although it only appeared to. Peter yelled over the commotion, "We can't outrun them forever," and Langston gestured ahead. They won't recognize the turnoff that leads to an old logging road." Peter saw the narrow path and veered onto it, causing the SUV to bounce over the uneven dirt track. Langston looked back as they paused at the turn, giving them a moment's advantage. They are continuing to move more slowly as the thick woodland closes in on them. Peter skillfully negotiated the perilous road through a dark tunnel formed by trees. But the automobile was suffering. Emma clung to Bella, her heart pounding after what seemed like a lifetime. A road led to a clearing, and Langston indicated the lodge. Peter, a tiny cabin tucked up amid the trees. When the car reached the cabin, everyone hurried out, with Langston leading the way to the door and swiftly unlocked it. Once inside, they blocked off the entrance while gasping for air. The stress in the lodge increased as the night grew darker, even though they were safe and the threat was still far away. Outside, a roaring wind mixed with the creaks of the ancient timber walls that Langston and Emma Peter had laboriously constructed. In order to strengthen their position, temporary barricades barred the windows, tripwires were placed around the perimeter, and a fire was burning. Bella, always on guard, cast menacing shadows on the walls low in the hearth. Her ears perked up as she laid near the door, feeling the weight of what lied ahead. "Are we certain that this will keep them away?" Langston tightened his hold on the weapon in his hands and said, "No," in response to Peter's question in a voice that was almost audible above a whisper. When Emma looked at Bella, she abruptly sprang up on her hackles, lifted the puppy, and let out a low growl as she kept her eyes on the door and heard Emma murmuring that her heart was racing. Faint crunching sounds outside intensified, followed by the distinct sound of footsteps coming through the snow. Langston signaled them to be silent as he stood close to the window, looking through a small opening in the eyelids, his jaw tensed, and the shadows were agitated by Emma's gut. Outside, there were numerous individuals moving with meticulous precision. These weren't just any intruders either. The uncomfortable silence was broken by a loud knock from professionals who were meticulous and armed. From outside a voice bellowed, "We know you're in there. Hand over the notepad." "Maybe this doesn't have to end poorly." Langston didn't respond, and Peter could see his grip tighten on the weapon. "We're not soldiers," Emma mumbled, trembling as she knelt next to Bella. "Stay close, girl," she said, her voice shaking as she stroked the dog's fur. Bella's snarl strengthened her loyalty, which remained unwavering, while the voice outside became irritated. "Langston, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." Langston's eyes met Emma's, and he said, "No matter what, I'll keep Bella safe." Spoken resolute, the first wave made a thundering smash before Emma could react. broke the front door as the intruders broke inside the lodge. Langston fired the initial shot as the commotion broke out. In his panic, Emma clutched a table while Peter scurried for shelter as the recoil echoed through the room. Bella heard the noise and lunged at the closest intruder, ready to defend herself with a big wooden plank. After was startled by her fierce bark, the man staggered back, creating a gap for Langston. Langston yelled at Emma to take a well-placed shot upstairs to disable him. Without hesitation, Bella followed Peter as they retreated up the small staircase. The upper floor had little to offer. Emma did her best to seal the door of the sanctuary, which had just one chamber and a boarded-up window, while Peter, "I don't know how to use this," Peter snarled, his hands quivering as he attempted to reload a rifle Langston had handed him earlier. Emma's adrenaline kicked in, and we had no choice but to go downstairs. Langston maintained his position while the combat raged, moving with deliberate precision and eliminating the intruders one by one. But his ammunition was running low, and their numbers appeared limitless. Upstairs, Bella's roar became louder, and Emma followed. The dog's eyes were fixed on the window where a faint figure's shape could be seen sobbing at the boards they were approaching. As she yelled, Peter lifted the rifle, his hands shaking, and fired a shot, shattering the glass and shattering the figure. I caught him as he fell back, vanishing into the darkness. Peter's voice was one of astonishment, but Emma responded, "Good, now keep doing it." Suddenly, a grenade was thrown into the bottom floor of the house, causing an explosion that knocked Peter and Emma unconscious. Bella yelled anxiously as debris fell on the ground around them. Emma was protected from falling splinters when Langston's voice came from below. Emma was now undecided about whether to stay or obey Langston's order. She told Peter that she couldn't leave him because he was buying us time. Peter countered by yanking her. Emma unwillingly grabbed Bella's collar and crawled out of the broken window toward the window, saying, "We have to get out of here." Peter was right after her as they clambered down the roof and into the window, the chilly night air stinging her face. The lodge was on fire behind them, the brightness illuminating the snow below. Langston's shadow emerged in the doorway under the starry sky, rifle in hand. With a grim determination on his face, he turned to face the remaining intruders. "Come on." The lodge exploded in a final blast, and Emma swallowed back a sob as he roared, the force knocking her hand. As the flames engulfed the structure and the dawn broke, Bella whined and curled close to Emma, bringing Peter to the ground. Emma and Bella sat by the smoking remains of the lodge, where the once pristine snow had become black with ash and rubble. Her arms were firmly wrapped around the dog, Peter, who was pacing close by, his face pallid. Emma muttered, her voice cracking, and drawn Langston Peter shook his head. "Knew what he was doing, so he gave us a chance." Emma tensed, but the sound of approaching cars shattered the heavy silence. The authorities were notified by the distant explosion ions, not the adversary. Uniformed officers and rescue workers flocked to the scene, their expressions displaying a mixture of resolve and worry. Emma approached the lead cop while holding onto the notebook that Langston had given up everything for. Holding out the notebook, she stated that it was the reason they came for us, and that it was evidence of everything that. Officer took the notebook, looking solemn as he turned the pages. "He will make sure this is handled correctly." He reassured her that it does, and Emma strongly stated that people must be aware of the reality. Emma knelt next to Bella and buried her face in the ground as the police sealed the area and started their investigation. "We made the dog's fur, girl," she muttered, and Peter joined her. He put his hand on her shoulder and asked, "What now?" Emma turned to face the horizon, where the first rays of sunlight were shining. "We proceed," she urged for Langston, for the truth that pierced the bleak sky. Despite the tiredness in her eyes, Bella gave a gentle bark and waved her tail to everyone who was counting on us. Rose was prepared for whatever came next.